Hi, I'm Dr. Ray Stout, and I have something I'd like to show you that I think could be a real game changer when it comes to supporting the children, particularly, who are having a difficult time with auditory processing, and especially those who may be struggling with reading and writing, as well as things like social skills. I'm going to show you two videos and I'm hoping you'll take the time to watch. I'm looking at getting some beta testers to help us developing some affordable, doable auditory training that integrates both sound and sight so that we can make sure that the experience is rewarding and doable and memorable to these kids, and that they're able to take that information and use it in their everyday lives. To be very clear, we are talking about probably 15 to 20-minute sessions, a little more often, that are done virtually and face-to-face. So just like this, you're able to talk with me, and the child is able to speak with me directly. It's, I think, a better way to go because you don't have to drive, and it's not just sitting listening to a computer program, which is so hard to pay attention to long term. The goal is to get as much of it face-to-face as possible. Hi, my name is Dr. Ray Stout. I am a audiologist, and I've been working with auditory processing disorders for many years at this point. I've probably seen over about 3,000 patients. And primarily I have worked with low gain programming of hearing aids. I was one of the very first people to do so. But I'm realizing more and more that it's important to give some more support to especially the children that we are working with using these low gain hearing aids, because so many of them have a history of auditory deprivation, or they've inherited a version of dyslexia, which means that they're not quite hearing some of the sounds in English or other languages that they need to really understand in noisy environments and echoes with rapid or soft speech, with accents, and it particularly tends to impact some of the downstream issues like reading disabilities, which can emerge as a result of not having a good phonological understanding. I am a very big proponent of visual language. I grew up signing, and I was signing since I was 3 years old. I became fluent or relatively fluent when I went to Gallaudet at age 14, and I ended up going to graduate school there, postdoctorate. But I'm also a very big proponent of a system called cued speech. When I went to school, the children that learned cued speech had a very good understanding of phonology. And what cued speech is a mixture of movement and placement using the hands that allows children to get 100% understanding of how the sounds in language work visually. It doesn't require any hearing at all, but it can combine, as a sign for combine. It can combine or mix with sound to give a better understanding of what sounds to expect. You know, how do you do auditory closure if you don't have good sound fidelity? So many of these children who grew up with cueing ended up with incredibly fluent written and read English, which was not necessarily the case for children who grew up without sign language, depending entirely on faulty hearing, or they had sign language, but they grew up without parents that signed well, and they had to depend on interpreters who might give them partial information. For example, they go to class and the teacher would say, please exemplify, please demonstrate, and the interpreter would say, show. which is great. It means that, but they didn't learn the vocabulary. The cued speech kids would learn demonstrate or exemplify. So they learned the actual vocabulary, which also gave them access to things like learning foreign languages and their phonologies. So the majority of auditory training that is typically used by audiologists almost always is auditory only. And I understand where they're coming from. You're trying to train the auditory system, you should train it through auditory means. The issue comes with the fact that if you are incapable of actually hearing all of those sounds clearly, how exactly are you supposed to build more complex language with missing pieces? It would be like walking on ice on a frozen lake when bits and pieces of the lake are missing. You would fall in. So this is my belief of what's going on, that auditory processing disorder is kind of an upstream problem. It causes problems downstream, like not learning good language and language delay, but it also causes other issues, reading issues, writing issues because of the poor phonology, but also inability to access social skills. Because if you don't hear the message, how are you supposed to understand the subtle rules of society? It causes frustration and anger. It causes fatigue. There are so many things that auditory processing disorder can cause, and that is why I want to look at an auditory visual combination system which guarantees 100% understanding, as opposed to teaching using their worst sense and assuming that that is enough. It isn't enough. So I will be looking for beta testers as I work on these materials, and it's going to take me some time because I'm pretty busy. I have 2 kids, including one who is autistic, but we will get through this, and I have a number of educators and other audiologists that are assisting, and we will be looking for ways to make this doable and affordable. It's a scary time in the world, and we need to band together and be a village for our children and make sure they have enough language that they are able to function as adults. There's a bit of overlap in what I'm going to say in this next part, but basically I'm just showing you an example of the beginning of teaching the basic sounds and the cues that go along with it. And what's really interesting is there are quite a few teachers that use UFly and Orton Gillingham in combination with cued speech, and they're finding some significant benefit in having that visual method of doing auditory processing. So I do apologize about the repetition. Here we go. Hello, my name is Dr. Ray Stout, and I am an audiologist that specializes in auditory processing disorders. I am working on creating a new project that combines auditory training with visual, phonetic, or phonemic input that will go very well. It'll combine with things like UFly or Orton Gillingham to help with pre-reading and reading skills. It is my belief that many of the children with auditory processing disorders are not able to hear some of the phonemes in English. So reviewing through these sounds, starting with the most basic, moving into blends, and then into full words, is going to help them with their ability to read. So what you're going to notice in this presentation is that I am using something called cued speech. Cued speech is a manual system that uses your hands in different locations for vowels and different hand shapes for consonants. the combination of the visual with the auditory, I believe, will make the ability to remember some of this information far more salient and easy than if it is given in an auditory only format. So let me show you what I'm doing so you have an idea of what to expect with these beta trials that we're going to be doing in the near future. This is the sound ah, 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 like in apple, ah, like in axe, ah, like in the app you have from the Apple Store on your iPad. When you say the sound ah, your mouth is open in a little bit of like a smile. Ah, it's an open sound. Ah, ah is an apple. If you were going to cue this sound, it would be ah, apple, apple. The sound A, like in the word acorn or apricot, is a little bit confusing because it isn't just one sound. It's actually two sounds blended together. It's a, which makes it a little harder to hear. A, acorn, a, acorn, acorn. Can you hear the two sounds?